You know, we often think that massive, world-changing success comes from some huge, dramatic moment. But what if that's all wrong? What if the real secret is actually the exact opposite? What if it's all about small, almost invisible improvements? Okay, let's get into this. To really get this, we're going to start with a story. The story of British cycling. Now, for the better part of a century, they were, well, let's just say they weren't very good. Actually, that's putting it nicely. They were the poster child for mediocrity. I mean, just look at this track record. In the 110 years before 2003, a British rider had never won the Tour de France. They'd only snagged a single Olympic gold medal, and that was way back in 1908. It was a long, long dry spell.
And if you need proof of just how bad things had gotten, get this. Their performance was so pathetic that one of the top bike manufacturers in Europe actually refused to sell bikes to the team. Why? Because they were literally afraid that if other pro cyclists saw the British team using their gear, it would kill their sales. I mean, that is rock bottom.
But then, in 2003, everything started to change. They hired a new performance director, a guy named Dave Brailsford, and he came in with a new and honestly kind of radical philosophy. He called it the 1% solution.
So Brailsford's whole philosophy was this idea he called the aggregation of marginal gains. It sounds fancy, but the idea was surprisingly simple. Break down every single tiny thing that goes into riding a bike, and then just improve each of those things by 1%. He was convinced that all those tiny gains would add up to something huge.
So he and his team got to work, and they started with the obvious stuff, you know? They redesigned the bike seats to make them more comfortable. They started rubbing alcohol on the tires for better grip. They even had riders wear electrically heated shorts to keep their muscles at the perfect temperature.
But here's where it gets really interesting. They didn't just stop with the bike. Oh no, they looked for that 1% improvement absolutely everywhere. They tested different massage gels to see which one helped muscles recover fastest. They hired a surgeon to teach the athletes the right way to wash their hands to cut down on colds. They even found the perfect pillow and mattress for each rider to guarantee a good night's sleep. They painted the inside of the team truck white just so they could spot tiny bits of dust that might mess with the finely tuned bikes. Nothing was too small.
So, what happened? Well, the results were just staggering. Just 5 years later, at the 2008 Beijing Olympics, the team completely dominated, winning 60% of the available gold medals. They went on to win the Tour de France 5 times in 6 years. Over a single decade, they won 178 world championships. It's now considered maybe the most successful run in the entire history of cycling.
So how on earth did this happen? How do a bunch of tiny little changes, like a new pillow or a different hand-washing technique, lead to such a massive victory? Well, it all comes down to a really powerful principle that applies to, well, everything in our lives. The compound effect of our habits. Let's dig into the math behind this magic.
1%. I mean, it seems so small, doesn't it? It's almost nothing. If you improve by 1% today, you're not even going to notice it. So how could it possibly lead to the kind of world-beating results the British cycling team saw? Well, what's so incredible is how this math plays out over time. See, if you get just 1% better each day for a whole year, you'll end up, get this, 37 times better by the time you're done. But, and this is important, the reverse is also true. If you get 1% worse each day, you'll decline almost all the way down to 0. So these small choices, they don't just add up, they compound. And that's the key takeaway here. Habits. They are the compound interest of self-improvement. It's just like how money multiplies with compound interest. The effects of your habits multiply as you repeat them. They seem to make almost no difference on any given day, but the impact they have over months and years, it can be absolutely enormous.
Okay, but this leads to a really common problem, right? We've all been there. We start making these small changes. We go to the gym a few times. We eat a healthy meal, and we don't see results right away. So we get discouraged. And that's because progress isn't a straight line. It's usually hidden at first in what the author James Clear calls the Plateau of Latent Potential.
Think about it like this. Imagine you have an ice cube in a room that's 28 degrees. Now you slowly start to raise the temperature, 29 degrees. 30, 31. Nothing seems to be happening, right? It's still just an ice cube. But then you hit 32 degrees and bang, a breakthrough. You get a massive change. Now, was all that work you did at 31 degrees wasted? No way. It was just being stored. All that effort was building up potential.
We expect our progress to look like this nice, clean, straight line climbing steadily upwards. But the reality is often this long, flat line, what you could call a valley of disappointment, where it feels like all our hard work isn't paying off. The key, the real secret, is understanding that the most powerful outcomes are delayed. You have to push through that valley to finally unlock that sudden, sharp upward curve. There's this great quote from Jacob Riis about a stonecutter that it nails this idea perfectly. When the rock finally splits in two, it wasn't that last hit that did it. It was all the 100 blows that came before it. All that effort was just building and building, waiting for that one breakthrough moment. So once you really understand this, it leads to a pretty major shift in how we think about getting better at things. All the conventional wisdom tells us to set these big, ambitious goals, but there's a much better way. We need to forget about goals and focus on building systems instead.
So what's the difference? It's actually pretty simple. A goal is the result you want to achieve, like winning the championship. A system is the process that leads to those results. It's what your team does at practice every single day. See, goals are great for setting a direction, but it's the systems that actually make the progress happen.
Now, here's a really fascinating question to think about. Let's say you're a basketball coach, and you completely ignore your goal to win the championship. You never even talk about it. Instead, you focus obsessively every single day on what your team does at practice. Would you still get results? The answer is almost certainly yes. And that's because a goals-only approach has some really serious flaws. I mean, think about it. Winners and losers in any field often have the exact same goal, so the goal itself can't be what separates them. Plus, achieving a goal is just a temporary change. It often makes you happy for a moment and then it's over, which can actually hurt your long-term progress.
This distinction is absolutely critical. The purpose of a goal is to win the game. It's a single event. But the purpose of a system is to keep playing the game. It's all about endless refinement and continuous improvement, not just a one-time accomplishment.
Let this one sink in, because this is really the core idea of this entire chapter. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. It's your system, what you do day in and day out, that actually determines your outcome.
And that brings us, finally, to the central idea, an atomic habit. It's not just any tiny change. It's a small, easy-to-do practice that acts as a fundamental building block of a much larger system. Just like atoms are the building blocks of molecules, atomic habits are the building blocks of incredible results. They are both tiny and unbelievably mighty.
So the real takeaway here isn't about some massive once-in-a-lifetime transformation. It's about your daily habits. It's about the system you follow every single day. Which really just leaves us with one final powerful question to think about. What tiny part of your system can you improve by just 1% today?